Sinners Anonymous is back with another episode. My name is Justine.
Mary.
Martine.
Mike. George.
Karen.
Irene.
Theophilus.
So this segment is called My Big Fat Egyptian Wedding. And if you haven't guessed, it's about relationships. This is actually one of the most requested topics that we discuss, so we're here to deliver. So stay tuned to hear our views and how we think it's best to battle cultural and societal stigmas.
And don't forget to follow us on our socials. Our Instagram is at sinners.anonymous, and all our videos can be found linked in our bio.
All right. So the big topic is finally here. What does it mean to have a relationship in the Coptic community? Notice I didn't say the Coptic church, the Coptic community. What is a relationship? What is permissible? What is not permissible? What is allowed? What is not allowed? What is haram? What is halal? Happy Ramadan, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about the issues that matter to you. You've written to us. You've texted us. You've DM'd us in an appropriate way. Thank you very much. And we are here to talk about these issues. We are here to get real. We are here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And okay, maybe some beauty. And get down to the topic, the substance of the topic. How do we have relationships with each other? How do we have friendships with each other that glorify God, that are beneficial? And what constitutes that which is okay and that which is not okay? That which is healthy and that which is unhealthy. These are the important topics that you guys want to hear about. So here we are bringing them to you. So let's start off with a big one. Do you guys think it's possible for a guy and a girl to be have a friendship and not fall for each other?
Yes.
Yes.
Karen went first. So Karen, lay it on us.
Yeah, I think it's possible. Once you set your boundaries, and if it's actually a friendship, what's the issue? Why not?
So I've actually heard from, I don't know, again, this is something, guys don't like to be friends with, I don't want to say they don't like to be friends with girls, but why would they be friends with girls unless if they don't have alternative motives or if they're like interested? I don't know.
I don't think that's true because like you can easily like look at you're not going to be attracted to every single like opposite gender like that you meet.
You obviously haven't met a lot of guys.
Well, like I don't know, like you're not going to look at every single girl and be like I want them all. Like I feel like you're going to have some friends, and sometimes let's say like maybe some guys like will try to initiate a relationship, but if the boundaries are set and like you show them that there's no like interest in a relationship, then why not have a friendship?
So this is definitely a big question. And I think it needs to be a little clarified, because what level of friendship am I in? Are we just saying like, I mean, we're all friends here, but are we saying like best friends, which I think is what we're talking about? I feel like that's maybe a little bit more challenging, not just because of the friendship itself, but okay, say I'm friends with a girl, and say I do later on I'm in a relationship with another person. This will definitely have complications for her as well. You know, that's just one factor I feel that maybe are gonna affect a friendship. But you know, there's also the attraction. You know, are we able to just stay friends? You know, is the guy gonna be attracted to her or vice versa? Or
I mean, if it happens naturally, like it just happens. Because sometimes people start off as friends, which I think is like really healthy that they have a friendship to start off with. And if it escalates into like a relationship naturally, then why not?
The problem that happens sometimes is that we go into it with different expectations. And you have one person who thinks that this is just a platonic relationship, and the other person actually really likes her romantically, or she likes him romantically. And if there's not a communication between the two, then you wind up having a bit of an issue, because then each one has different thoughts of what's going on, and and then there becomes to be some issues.
That's a really good point. I think understanding the purpose of the friendship from both sides is really important, because if, like you said, Mike, if someone is going in with different expectations out of the friendship than someone else is, it won't be friendly or happy ending, so to
And I think
say.
sometimes people send mixed signals. Like I know of an example of one time where someone invited him to meet her parents, and so he thought this was actually like
Serious.
something serious, and she didn't mean it that way at all. But that was the signal that she sent out.
Ooh.
Well, yeah. Here's the thing, though.
Poor
Like,
guy.
two comments about that. One, expectations are always changing. They're always evolving. You might start off the relationship or the friendship with a certain set of expectations. You might, and she might be on a completely different plane, and they can flip. They can get in sync. Sometimes you can perceive that, I really like what you said about yada yada yada. You'd be like, oh yeah, she likes me, when she has absolutely no desire. In fact, I think that's probably one of the most common things, especially in the good guy, Coptic community. Not to say that there's a bad guy Coptic community. Who knows? But in the nice boys, it's so hard to read. The other gender. Like, is she into me? Is she not into me? Like, is this something that I should be pursuing? Does she just want to be platonic, right? It's like you're reading Hebrew and you have no idea what it says, but you're interested, you want to know, and you just can't. So the question then becomes, well, how do we better set expectations when we start off these friendships and these relationships? And how do we maintain that we're staying true to them? Because if we're not cognizant of it, if we just let our emotions develop willy-nilly without any kind of overwatch, right? And I think everyone here knows what overwatch is. And we're not policing our thoughts and emotions and our behaviors, you get into a lot of trouble very quickly.
Communication.
And and not leaving things out in the dark. I think that's another issue, is making sure that other people know about what's going on and that you have some intentionality and not just, like Theophilus was saying, it's not just willy-nilly. Just know what's going on and kind of pick up on the signals. And it's the issues happen more when we just go with the flow and aren't thinking about what we're doing.
So actually, I want to jump back to the point you mentioned, Justine, which is communication, because I feel like that's a point that we kind of miss sometimes, like, at least I'll speak for like us girls, like usually when like you think a guy is giving you a signal, like instead of going to talk to the guy, you'll be like, oh my God, Irene, like he said this, what do you think?
Oh,
or
yeah,
like,
that's so true.
Or like he
Yeah.
snapped me this, like let's like interpret this, let's have a girls night, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes it
Analyze.
gets confusing because then like Irene thinks he likes you and like the other girl's like, no, he's being nice. And like at the end of the day, I think you need to have a conversation with the person and see if, which is easier said than done, I get,
But then who initiates that conversation?
Well,
Ooh,
whoever's
taboo
maybe
topic.
like the person that's having feelings. I mean, I don't see what's the problem with being upfront and saying like, okay, like I know like we're friends like right now, but I just want to know like, is this like going somewhere? Like, are we staying like just friends, or are you planning on this like growing into something? Like, I feel like that should be like normalized, like having that conversation.
And like you said, Irene, it should be normalized, and I think it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people have, I don't want to say egos, but they don't want to put their walls down. Or they don't want to stand the chance of like getting rejected. So rather than that, they kind of just, like you said, Mike, wait it out, see what happens, go with the flow, and then nothing ever happens, and everyone's sitting there. Does he like me? Does she like me? I don't know. Can she text me? Can he text me? And it's kind of just like,
frustrated.
yeah, it's just like a waiting game basically until, you're 45 and still single. So that's a new one.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's a new one.
we brought out all the stops for this. Absolutely. If we lived in a community and had relationships and felt comfortable enough with each other to be that forward and that honest, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, yeah, this would be a lot easy. But is that the case? Because I get the feeling, or at least the stories that I hear, I'm such an old man, I'm no longer in the game, guys, but like the stories that I hear is there's a lot of deception. There's a lot of mistruths. There's a lot of things that are purposely left unclear, whether it's someone's beliefs, what they actually believe, or what they do for a living, what they're trying to accomplish in life, even their values. Like, yeah, I like that too. And no, you don't. You don't like it at all. Church annoys you. The first thing and the last thing you're thinking about when you're in liturgy is, when am I going to get out of here? Right? Meanwhile, she's like, You know, like, how is that going to work if it does progress to the sacrament of marriage?
I think to back up just a little bit, I think we also have to look at kind of how Mike mentioned in the beginning, expectations, but at the same time, is somebody ready to go into a relationship? Or for what reason are they looking to be in a relationship?
So can we back up and talk about knowing ourselves first before knowing somebody else?
We'll back up again.
If we keep backing up, we're going to just run into the guy behind us.
Adam and Eve.
So Justine, where do you want to take this? Let's go.
Yeah, let's start with knowing ourselves first, because that's really important.
So yeah, a lot of the problems that happen with relationships is if you don't know yourself well, and if you haven't matured well, and you're trying to get into a relationship or even a friendship with somebody, if you don't know who you are and you just mold yourself into whoever you're with, then everything's going to go south. Because you're going to be with this person, and you're going to be this person, and you're going to be with the next person, you're going to be the other person, and who are you really? And nothing's really the communication isn't even going to work because you're not communicating yourself, you're communicating some other version of yourself. And so the most important person is us, like you yourself and your relationship with God.
I think there's a time, definitely, where personal gain is kind of most maximized when you're single. It's difficult. There is a blessing and a gain when you're in a relationship, which is great, but having that personal growth, it's can be difficult at times to happen with the other person, just because your personality kind of develops on a dependency as opposed to just independence. You know, when I say independent, I don't mean just relying on yourself completely, but your personality growth, you learn how to manage your own ideals, you learn how to manage your time. You figure out what you want in life when you're single. And this is crucial for a young person, for teens, especially for women, and for guys too. Obviously, men need to grow. And you also learn how to depend on God more when you're single, as opposed to a relationship. You know, this is when you're struggling with something, going through a trouble, whether it's mental, spiritual, whatever. Your parents are there, your friends are there, but you tend to lean more a little bit to God too. So you have the spiritual growth, the mental growth, and also education and everything like that where you are. So there is a certain necessity of being single, which is I feel like it's being dismissed today. The single life is so important, so important. So I feel like that's maybe needs to be addressed a little more.
Well, let's talk about our culture and single life. Does our culture really like single people?
I mean, they like it at until a certain age or a certain success point. And then once you reach that point, you're marriage. You totally skip over everything else.
Automatic.
Yeah.
Has anyone felt that?
Well, she didn't. Hold on, she didn't finish. Yeah.
No, but that's what I was just saying. You get to a certain point where you're not forced, but you're supposed to be single until you reach a certain age, and then you hit another age, and then you have to jump into marriage. You totally skip over meeting opposite genders and having conversations and having friendship, then you have to jump into marriage.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
It's like that switch that turns on.
Yeah, you hit a certain age and it's okay, give me the dates. When is the wedding, baby shower? Lay it down.
And I suffer.
Oh my gosh. Stop.
Well, I think a lot of that comes from a good place. And I mean, nobody's saying that to make us feel bad. A lot of it's just cultural. But jumping back to what George and Mike were saying, I think a lot of the growth in being single, like they were saying, is identifying your priorities and the things that you absolutely want in a relationship, and that if it's not there, a relationship is not going to work. And unfortunately, sometimes that means letting go of relationships that we thought would work or that we wanted to work, but it might just not be aligned with who we are. If you're, very religious and you want someone who's very serious about God, and there's a guy you like, but he's just not that into it, then that might be something that you just have to let go of. And you have to know that those priorities for you that are a necessity are things that you can't get into a relationship with someone if they don't have those things.
بس استني بس he has the 3 Ds. Deacon, دكتور يا ماما, what is it, George?
دمه خفيف.
دمه خفيف. Like on paper, he presents يعني, there's a whole line of people ready to you're telling me that it's, even though that's the case, even though on paper it checks all the boxes, even though Tant Basbusa, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother who passed away, all of them, they want me to marry this guy, I should actually stop and make sure that we're in line with our beliefs?
Well, you're not marrying a piece of paper. You're marrying a human being. And that human being...
No, you need more.
And you're marrying him, not Tant Basbusa.
Yeah, exactly.
Basbusa doesn't have to live with him for the next 50 years or however long you live.
Yeah, no, that's spoken like a true married person. Continue, please, because you're speaking gospel right here.
Oh, okay.
No pressure.
I mean, it is important, though. Like, the things that other people want for us might not be what we're looking for or what's best for us. And you really have to make that decision based on how you're going to live the rest of your life and how you want your family to be down the line. So, whoever you're compatible with, and if they're not a doctor, they're not a doctor. It's not like the end all be all. If someone you get along with and someone who has the same values and same priorities, you make compromises on the things that aren't a necessity for you.
And I think in the past it's been, if I look at my grandma, for example, or my great-grandma, they all, back then it used to be, and even here in America too, women used to get married at younger ages. They would stay at home. They'd be at stay-at-home moms. So prioritizing an education or work was never in the lifestyle back then. So then when they come and look at our generation now, it's such a big gap between where they were raised and versus where we're raised. And I think sometimes they have a hard time seeing that. So when they see women who are in their late 20s, for example, not married, for example, they're like, what's wrong with her? There has to be something wrong. Or a guy, in his 30s and he's not engaged or something. What's wrong with him? Why isn't he engaged? And it's not that it's not that it's incorrect to get married younger, but it's just nowadays there are so many other things that are out there for, and I'm talking about females because it was different for them, much more different for them back in the day versus now. And so back then, they didn't go to college. They worked very minimal jobs if they did. Nowadays, in order to get a minimal education, you need 3 to 4 years of an undergraduate degree, and then you go to graduate school, then God knows what postgrad studies or training you do after, and then you do the job search. So it's a much stretched out timeline that we have now versus how it was back then. And so that generational gap, I think, can sometimes impose pressures on the current generation that are not incorrect, but are sometimes affecting a girl's self-esteem, for example, of, oh my goodness, I'm 25 and I'm not married yet. Is there something wrong with me?
What are you worried about getting a career for? You're just going to stay home and make babies.
Well, exactly. That's what they're saying. That's what Tant Basbusa says. That's what, and
Most
that's
of the farms around here are going away, so I don't think that's going to work anymore.
most of the what?
The farms around here are going away. We're just building houses where the farms were, so we can't live that way anymore.
I think it's a Saidi joke. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the nurseries here in
Forget
Florida
it.
or something. I was like,
Well,
oh, they are?
see, that's the problem that we have, and I hate to bring up past subjects, but there is a cultural clash, right, between what our parents and the older generation has come to accept as the natural progression of life, and that which is the new normal. And the new normal is if a woman wants to go out and get a career, and use the talents that God gave her and invest it into the way that she's supposed to invest it according to the parable of the talents of the servant, right? That wasn't just male servants. It's female servants too, right? Then she has every right to do that. But of course, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Mm-hmm. And if that is understood, and if your father confessor is on your side, and of course you've talked this out with your parents, which is a tough one, and everyone's at least on the same page, you're aware, then okay, then do that which you feel God is calling you to do. Right? But to say that every single girl, the second she is 16 or 18 or whatever it is, should start be looking, it's like, don't talk to the boy, don't talk to the boy, don't talk to the boy. Like, she turns 18. Why are you not married yet? You told me not to talk to any boys. Like, what am I supposed to be doing, right? So it's like the switch happens. It's the weirdest thing in the culture. And by the way, it's nothing to do with religion. It's the weirdest thing in the culture. It's so confusing.
It's a lot of Mediterranean cultures. Like other people that I know, and even Indian people, they say the same thing, that they're in their culture, it's the same thing.
And I think it goes back to the point of just being able to have friends of the opposite gender when you're younger, not for any other ulterior motive other than just the fact that you're getting a different perspective. You're interacting with these people and seeing how they think differently. Men and women think differently. So, and you know, someone once said a friendship is basically like a safe perspective. You're not in a relationship. You're not obligated to act in any certain way. You're just friends with this person. You're getting their perspective on life, on their decisions, and it just kind of gives you a look into what, you know, how other people think.
But how do you manage the boundaries? Because it's so easy to say, oh, you know, that's just my guy best friend. And then before you know it, in a moment of weakness, in a time when you feel like you're so alone and this person is there for you, well, maybe the line gets a little bit blurred, right? Maybe you fall into temptation. Maybe you kind of totally don't even realize it, not even cognizant and are in denial about it. And then you find yourself, you know, in a relationship with this person, or even worse, the idea of this person, right? How do you have, or is it even possible for us to have platonic relationships with the opposite gender, or I should say friendships, I don't mean relationships, with the opposite gender, and still be able to keep God in the midst of us? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Let's try to answer the question.
I really do think it's possible. And that's also like knowing your boundaries. Like there's definitely things like you shouldn't say, you shouldn't do. Like if like a girl knows like when she's being flirtatious, like obviously like don't flirt with him if you don't have any intention of dating, to not give him like the wrong idea. And that goes like both ways. Like men can easily like, you know, pull you along for a ride and give you this idea that they like you when they have no intention. So it's being like upfront, like don't like mislead the other person if you don't have any intention of being with them. Like I feel like that's like the first thing. And then I'm gonna go back and say like you should be upfront. Like if you have a desire from the beginning of talking to this person that you want to get into a relationship, like I think it needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Like I know that sounds hard, but like I feel like that's the only like realistic thing. Like if you're gonna start this friendship and you know that you are looking to be in a relationship, it needs to be addressed.
And I think getting to know the person a little bit better as well. And you could get to know somebody of the opposite gender really well. And like, for example, you could start off in group settings. You know, you guys are all hanging out together. I think it's also important to know how, if you're looking to be in a relationship with someone, how somebody interacts with their friends, how they interact with other people, strangers, waiters, waitresses, you know, things like that. So you can gauge their perception, their personality, their attitudes, what are their weakness points, strengths, things like that. And like you said, Irene, you know, being upfront and being, you know, communicative, is that a word?
Yeah.
Oh, well, SAT word of the day. So if you communicate that to somebody, then there shouldn't be any like blurred lines. But then again, it comes down to who's going to drop their ego first, or who's going to, you know, shed their wall down and say, hey, I'm interested in you, and put the risk out there of getting rejected. I think that's the problem that we face a lot. I actually saw this meme the other day that was like, our society these days normalizes not caring. But in reality, like, we do want somebody who care. We do want somebody who calls, who asks if we're okay, you know, stuff like that. But, you know, the cool thing is to act like you don't care, which I don't know who made that up, but
No,
it's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
What about qualifications? And I don't mean what does he do, how much money does he make, and I don't mean that in terms of qualifications. Does the advice that it is permissible and it is okay to be in a friendship with the person of the opposite gender, does that apply to everyone of every age? Or are there certain qualifications we need to make sure we meet before we would advise someone to do that?
I think you have to be at a certain point in your life, like going back to like self-analyzing. Like if you And with you have to be with your father in confession and analyze it yourself, because I think having a father in confession, like with this topic, is extremely important to help guide you through what the next step is. Like if you ask him like, Abuna, like I'm thinking of getting into a relationship, he will ask you the necessary questions and help guide you into like the next step. Like, okay, Habibti, like maybe you are ready, or maybe no, I think you're too young spiritually, or you're not mature enough for a relationship yet. Like that's what I would say. Like you would have to talk to a father for confession or your parent if you're comfortable with it.
And that's a great point, like thinking of why do you want to be in a relationship?
Oh, actually, I think usually now, like girls nowadays, they're doing it just because everyone else is doing it. So they'll start getting into a relationship and then they'll get out of it and they're like, I can't be single, so I have to get into another one. And then they just keep going into
There's no healing.
That's so true,
There's no
yeah.
self. So then by the time they're actually, it's the age of them getting married, they're like, well, I don't want to get married now. I've seen too much. I've been
hurt too many times.
I've been hurt too many times. I don't want to get married now. And they just don't get married at the end. Or they'll wait for a long time and then they don't get married because the pressure on the young girls nowadays, they're like, oh, you have to have someone, you have to be in a relationship or else you're the weird one. And then I feel like someone has to teach girls nowadays, especially the young ones, that it's normal to be single. That's the right thing. But it's the pressure.
Yeah, I think we're tying it all together, actually. So you need to have a bunch of guides. You need to have people that you trust in your life that can talk to you. There are times when we do things that are just foolish and that we're just not in our right minds. And you need to have someone, whether it's a good spiritual friend, whether it's your parents, whether it's your father confession. And the more of those godly people that you have in your life, the more they can wake you up and be like, hey, what are you doing here? Just like wake up, be intentional about what you're doing. And yeah, that relationship or that friendship may be okay with you at a certain point in your life. It may not have been okay at another point in your life. How you're interacting with that person, whether it's in a group with a lot of other people, if it's one-on-one, in a way where certain things are not kosher and are not going the way that they should be going. And then also have a plan for yourself. Think that we are important enough, that I am important enough, that God loves me and he has a plan for me, and I have this plan that I want to do, and it's not what he wants to do, what she wants to do, or what he wants me to do, and it's not a one size fits all. I don't have to get married at 16, and I don't have to wait until I'm 38 to get married either. And maybe for me, getting married early and then having kids and then completing my career afterwards is what's going to work for me. Or maybe having my career early on is going to work for me. Be open to a lot of things, but not have everything people move you.
I think that's where church comes in, or especially like Sunday school. Now, especially like for high school girls or middle school, they need their servants to talk to them about that. But like church is now kind of like, oh, I may fashion kadam an modo. Why? Like they know. They've seen
a taboo topic.
Yeah, like you're supposed to talk to them, or else who are they gonna talk to? They're gonna talk to their friends at school that are bad, their influence, and then they're just gonna keep telling them, oh, yeah, do that, but it's not. But I feel like church needs to up their game in that for that point, and like tell them that it's okay, you can, and like teach them.
Yeah,
like teach them like the proper way, like instead of saying like, no, we just don't do that, like tell them like, okay, like this is how it would be done properly, like in the right way in Christ's eyes. Like help them, guide them like in a correct way. And also, like, I have to say this, like if you're young and you have to hide it from your parents, like then just don't do it, because it's just like that's just how you know. That one. Like that's just how you know.
Or how about this one? Here's the thing. If God is not invited into the friendship, it's not kosher. If you feel as if God was in the room when you're having the discussions, or he's also getting a copy of the DMs. I know that's a horrible thought, but you have to think about it. Or he can hear the internal thought process that you are having, and you are embarrassed or ashamed. Habibi, stop. Because it's not going to end well. I promise you it's not going to end well. And even if, then some people say, well, I love this person. They're my forever person, right? It's like we're going out and we're picking dogs at the pound. This is my, I want to give you a forever home.
We're doing charity.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest. If you don't bring God into that relationship and let him choose for you, it's not going to end well. And if that person really is for you, and God has laid his hands on the relationship or the friendship, you don't have to run this on your time. You let him figure it out. You let him figure out when the right time is, right? And you let him generally bring it in the direction that he wants to. And before you know it, it's going to happen. But if you force it, if you try to push your will over God's will, well, there's an entire book that has some great stories about people who tried that. And it ended up horrible for all of them, right? I mean, there isn't a single person in the Bible who forced their will over God's will and ended up happy. It don't work. And you can still think about that in our lives. Yeah, in our lives. And show me anyone that's happy. And don't be confused between infatuation and love. Like let's say you meet the criteria. I'm going to drop some Sunday school knowledge here. Number one, you are at a spiritual level where you are ready to accept another person in your life and be responsible for them. Mm-hmm. Like, that's very important. We always forget that.
I think a lot of people forget that when you're in a relationship, you're responsible for the other person just as much as like you are for yourself.
Yes.
Because then it becomes two independent people just running side by side, trying to please themselves in one way, shape, or form. And it's never going to end happy. So.
And it starts before the dibla, everybody. People think, it gets serious when you put the dibla. No. You know when it starts? The second you decide you want to have a friendship. You are now responsible for that other person. You're responsible for their happiness. You're responsible for their sense of self. You're responsible for their purity, guys and gals. You're responsible for everything you are now responsible for that person. Until it gets to a point where that person is detracting from your spirituality, from your happiness, from your sense of being, from your relationship with God. And that's the best bellwether to know when something is not okay, right? That is God saying, if this person's going to take you away from me, you know what? It's over, right? This is not the person for you. In every friendship, in every relationship, the best ones are the ones that bring you closer to God, right? If all this person wants to talk about, this new movie or the new Kicks or, Kim Kardashian or Kid Cudi or all these things, and never once you're talking about God and you feel fulfilled. You never once you're talking about the church. Never once let's read the Bible together. I prayed for you the other day. I put your name on the altar, right? And I actually mean those things because unfortunately there are wolves in sheep's clothing, right? Let's be honest. If that person is not doing that and you're not doing it for the other person, there's no God in that relationship and there's no God in that friendship. So either you bring God in or you end it, right? So number one, you're responsible for each other. Number two, you're in a point where you're financially ready to be in a relationship. Gentlemen, I want to tell you something. You think the most expensive thing you're going to buy her is that diamond ring? Habibi, by the time you're in the grave, you're going to spend triple, quadruple more on her than just what the diamond ring costs, right? So it's important to keep something in mind. Can you handle that? Are you in a place where you can provide for yourself and the other person, right? And then the last thing is, do you know yourself? That's probably the hardest one, because do you really know who you are? And the only way you can really know who you are is you've read the instruction manual, the Holy Bible. You've talked to the creator and you've gotten some troubleshooting tips from the manufacturer, prayer, Jesus Christ. And most importantly of all, you've actually spent time testing it out. Like you know yourself. You spend some time reflecting and understanding who you are. If you don't have that deep sense of connection with God, you are not ready. And I'm sorry to be so judgmental. I've never met a 16-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old that had all of those things. I'm going to be real here. I've never met someone in their 30s that had all of those things, right? But the idea is, at some point, God says, "You're ready, and here's the other person." And if you're trying to force that, God help you.
Absolutely. God brought Eve to Adam. Adam didn't have to go hunting.
How did that turn out?
Well,
Happily after the one mistake.
I feel like this is shade on women, and I will not stand for it.
No.
So I want to answer the question of, do you know yourself? And a good point that you mentioned, Theo, is that you need to wait and have some patience and allow God's plan to fall through. And I think besides knowing yourself, you also need to love yourself. It takes an immense amount of self-respect and self-love. No, it really does. It takes a great amount of self-respect and self-love to sit there and accept the rejections, or accept that your relationship is not working out, your friendship is not working out, and to understand that A, there's nothing wrong with you, and B, there is a plan for you. Because how are you going to face all the societal pressure of, why don't you have a boyfriend? Why aren't you talking to someone? And why aren't you in a relationship when you're 20-something, 30-something? Unless you do love yourself and you do believe that I'm worthy, and there's really not anything wrong with me. It's just that's the way it is for now.
And who's your biggest cheerleader? Your biggest cheerleader is God. Your biggest cheerleader is God. Who's going to love you more than anyone? God. So if you want to try to figure out how do you love yourself and get over like all your insecurities, it's God. Because God sees through all of that no matter what.
Actually, what I did want to say is the God choosing someone for you, that doesn't happen from, okay, I decided here one day, I'm going to ask God about it the next day. No. The choosing process actually takes years. Like, I should be asking God, like on a daily basis for years, God, have someone of your choosing who's right for me, who's a good fit for me, who can help me grow when I get to that point, and I can help them grow too. And this actually kind of helps because it takes a little bit of pressure off, because sometimes maybe from a guy's perspective too, when you feel like you just have to figure everything out yourself, there's a lot of pressure there. When I have to, can I make the right choice? Am I just choosing everything from my own understanding? This is a lot of pressure, and you just don't know what to do. But knowing there's someone helping you throughout the entire process, however long it takes, years, however long it needs to be, this will give you a little comfort, So I think that was kind of what I wanted to mention.
So, quick question, just scoping the room. Are girls supposed to play the waiting game and guys are the ones that pursue?
No, I don't think so.
Just curious.
It doesn't have to be.
I feel like I feel like it just happens. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but maybe I think it's supposed to happen like naturally. Like I don't. What do you mean? Like
kind of like yes and no on
like
that one.
what do you mean by like the waiting game? Like, do we wait to be like approached?
Right.
Okay.
Because some people live by like an older. So that was kind of like the older idea where, again, girls kind of just stand there, they wait until somebody comes, they're approached, and then they say yes or no to the relationship and move forward. And guys were usually the ones that did the pursuing. So what are your perspectives on girls maybe doing the pursuing and guys sitting back?
I think it's fine, honestly, but kind of like also going back to the culture thing, يعني if like طنط بسبوسة sees someone doing that, you're like, يا نهار أبيض أنت إزاي تعمل حاجة زي كده?
Yeah.
You can't.
Like you're seen as like very odd and just out of place if you did that. But I feel like that should be fine. Like if you are interested and you want to initiate a conversation, like go for it. Like what's the
Yeah, it depends on the person, يعني whatever they're comfortable with.
It also depends on how it's done too. Because if a guy sees someone being a girl being too forward, and he might take it as being like controlling or like being like they don't have the leadership role in that relationship, and they may be put off by it. And so it all depends on how it's done. There are tactful ways to make someone know that you're interested without being completely too off-putting. And guys can do it too. Guys can be very off-putting sometimes in the way that they approach someone. And so it really all depends on how you're doing it.
But it also like comes down to like not trying to cut you off, but like you have to self-analyze. Like if you are the type of person that likes initiating conversation and that's just who you are, then do it. Like you don't have to pretend like you're waiting for a guy to approach you. Like just do it. And if he doesn't like women approaching him, he doesn't like a strong, like, I don't know, confident woman like that, like then that's just not for you.
Yeah.
Like you just be who you want to be. Like I feel like there's no right or wrong answer. Like you just do you. If you want to initiate.
So let's move on into talking about baggage, bringing baggage into a relationship. This is really heavy because I feel like everybody has a past. Everybody has something that's happened before. And trying to figure out when do I take the mask off, so to say, for the skeletons hiding in the closet. Not you, Theo. Keep yours on. We don't want to see your face. Sorry.
Good one.
Thanks. So when do we go into that? When is a good time to, reveal who you really are to somebody? Let's say you started into, getting more serious and you guys are getting to know each other. At what point do you start telling them who you really are, revealing deep secrets?
I'm going to put you on the spot, Mary. I want a married perspective on this. Go.
I think there's definitely, you don't want to jump into it too early. If it's, your first conversation, you're not going to just tell them everything. But I think it is important early on to, kind of be upfront about what you're bringing in, because if one of those things is a deal breaker for someone, you don't want them to feel like they've been blindsided and, why would you tell me this right before we get engaged, when it's something that they wouldn't have wanted, but you got so far into the relationship, they kind of feel trapped. So it's definitely important to bring it up early. But again, like I said, you don't want to scare someone. You don't want to just jump right into it before you're ready. So you have to make sure a little bit of trust is there, a little bit of, faith that they're not going to use it against you or they're not going to judge you for it. But, it kind of, you want to give that person a fair chance to decide, is this something I really want to get into, or is this something that, maybe I should find somebody else?
Yeah, you want the male married perspective? Wait until Abuna puts the crowns on and then you can be yourself. Because if you do it beforehand, she's going to run away. Seriously, guys, she's going to run away. No, seriously. No, but that's actually a problem we hear all the time in the community. If we could get serious once, I thought I married Mr. Perfect. I ended up marrying Mr., morally subjective, someone who doesn't really believe in any hardcore morals, or someone who appeared to be loving but is actually very selfish. They only love themselves, or someone who appeared to present as someone who cared very much about Christ, but I got into the marriage and, that's just not the case. They love something else more or someone else more, right? These things happen all the time. If we're going to get real and talk about them in terms of what actually happens in the world, sometimes there's so much pressure to close the deal, if you know what I mean, to have finally be in a relationship, especially the older you get, especially for women, that sometimes people settle. Sometimes people refuse to pay attention to the messages the Holy Spirit is sending them, which is saying, whoa, this is not it. Stop. This person is not it for you. This person is not going to be the person that's going to take care of you and value you and be able to carry out the wasiyah in English.
Commandments.
The commandments. You're giving commandments on the day that you get married, right? And if you don't follow those commandments, you will be judged. And those commandments are pretty harsh. The only one that everyone knows is woman, obey your husband. That's the only one everyone knows. But if you were to actually read it, there's way more than that, right? You're supposed to cater to her happiness. You're supposed to do things that gladden her heart, right? So if you're doing things that gladden her heart, you're taking out the trash, you're putting the seat down, you're putting gas in the car while she sleeps. You're doing all of these things, right? The problem is we live in a community that has a double standard. We live in a community and a culture that says, listen, if I see you talking to one boy, I am going to hit you so hard. Meanwhile, her brother is doing whatever he wants, hanging out with whoever he wants, being in whatever relationship he wants. Oh, boys will be boys. Boys need to learn how to be men. Let them just talk and have relationships and pornography and whatnot. And meanwhile, the girl's expected to maintain purity, like one spot, one little blemish, and she's just impure, right? That's an extreme. I hope to God that's not in every church and every community, but it's an extreme that exists out there, right? So then you have these very pure women in some cases, and you have these men who are presenting as similar in terms of purity, but they're not. And then they're getting into a relationship, and then she's getting to marriage, and then she wakes up and she realizes, this isn't love. Like, this isn't sex. This isn't commitment. These aren't the things that I was told to uphold, right? Because all of this baggage is being brought into the relationship. And now I have to deal with it like it's my problem, right? When I did everything right, I did everything I was supposed to. And I even took this person's word for it. So now you're in this relationship where the marriage doesn't work, and you've already, not only did you rush the marriage, you rushed the kids. Now you got 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids. What are you gonna do?
Next time on Sinners Anonymous.
Before I decided myself, okay, like this is the right person for me, I first need to figure out what the baggage is.
There is no divorce in the Coptic Church. There is no divorce except for 3 very specific reasons, and the likelihood of the relationship dissolving into that is unlikely. So you make a commitment, you're in it for life. So don't just say yes.
You'd be surprised how much you can tolerate when you actually love this person. And that goes for friendships, family, relationships. Like, especially with girls, we're always like, oh, I can fix this. Like, I can take care of it. So that's a good thing to think about, is if you don't think you can tolerate this small thing, then that's probably not the person you want to pursue.
And more importantly, that this person is a follower of Jesus Christ. I'm sorry to say, just because they're Christian, just because they're a deacon, just because, Bintanes, just because, she comes from a good family, it doesn't mean that they're a follower of Christ.
It's really, it makes your life is better when you, not that your life is bad before, but I think it really does add to your happiness and your relationship with God and with others. And it's good to be married.
Before you get married, you're living your life on a scale between 4 and 6. Your lowest times are going to be a 4, your highest times are going to be a 6. You get married and your highest time is going to be a 10 and your lowest is going to be a 0. And then you have kids and your highest is like off the charts, positive infinity, and then your lowest is going to be negative infinity.
Marriage is like sandpaper. Yeah,
Yes.
I know, Mary.
What does that mean?
I know.
Yeah, we're like,
Elaborate.
Yeah, get ready.